Hi, and welcome to The Content Engine. Have you ever wanted to start a podcast to spread a message or grow your business? Well, then you're going to love today's guest. Todd Evans is the host of the popular Go Hunt Life podcast, where he shares inspirational stories of people who have gone through a life transformation, of pulling the ripcord, as he calls it, moving from a life of normalcy to one of adventure and living life on their terms. He started the podcast around 2 years ago when he moved to Austin with his wife. He wanted a way to help grow his PPC business, Click Placement, as well as network with others in Austin. So he basically went from knowing nothing, not knowing how to edit a podcast or how to produce a podcast, to now, a year and a half later, having a very loyal following, being featured in multiple publications, and opening up so many new opportunities for him. So in this episode, we talk about those early stages of starting the podcast, those challenges, that breakthrough moment, and some of the strategies he used to help grow his audience and really hone in on who that ideal listener and ideal guest were, and the impact that the podcast has had on himself, both personally and professionally. Oh, and he also shares a few incredibly inspirational stories from the Go Hunt Life guests that he's had on his show. Let's get started. Welcome to the show, Todd.
Alex, thanks.
Well, before we dive into some questions, I'd love to know a little bit more about yourself, and particularly what inspired you to, tell us a little bit about the Go Hunt Life podcast.
I moved to Austin a year and a half ago in early 2016, and I knew zero about starting a podcast. I was a podcast listener, but I came here and kind of dug into the local community and saw the power behind marketing yourself, your business, your brand through the audio format. And so I jumped in and started the Go Hunt Life podcast in the spring of 2016 without knowing anything. I went from zero up to launch in under 3 months.
Wow. And how would you summarize the purpose behind the podcast or the message behind it?
I was looking for a way to maybe to differentiate myself. I was new to town. I'm an AdWords marketing consultant. I work with startups and nonprofits and small businesses to help them with their PPC marketing, their AdWords marketing campaigns. I was new to Austin, and I needed a little bit of a differentiator between me and all the other people that do that. And I wanted a way to get into the entrepreneurs and the people in the tech space within Austin, but in a different way. And so that was the mentality behind starting the podcast. And the premise of it is that I interview people that were once on like a normal, straight, predictable career life path. Typically, I want to get somebody that's at least 10 years into teacher, accountant, attorney, something like that, 10, 20, 30 years in, but then reach that line where they thought, cliche of you only live once, or I'm not happy, I want to pull the ripcord and do something completely different. And this city is full of life reinvention stories like that. So there's plenty of opportunities to interview people that have had a path like that.
For sure. And is that a transformation that you yourself went through, or have you followed this entrepreneurial journey from the beginning?
I've been an entrepreneur since for 20 years, but 8 years ago, my wife and I found ourselves living safe, predictable, comfort bubble path in a suburb of Dallas, and we had the house and the yard and the grass that I mowed and the tools in the garage. And inside of 8 months, we had sold everything down to a few suitcases and got on a plane with our English bulldog and moved to Mexico. And
Wow.
We lived in Mexico for 5 years. And so that I know the fear, I know the unknown, I know looking at a spreadsheet, there are no reasons why we should be doing that. Yet we still did it. We ignored the spreadsheet and the logic and went with heart and passion and inspiration. And so those are the stories that I'm exploring, because I know exactly what these people are going through or have gone through, and the euphoria and then the fear and the oh my gosh, and then making it real. And that's a whole transition. So I want to interview people that are basically 2 years past that ripcord, because it's the honeymoon's over and now it's real, and then there's a validation point. Since they're 2 years in, they've figured it out at that point. So that's the impetus behind Go Hunt Live. So yeah, I had a similar ripcord.
It's so cool that you've narrowed down and you have such focus on who that ideal guest is. Did you have that clarity from the very beginning, or is that something that kind of evolved as you started doing more episodes?
I had the clarity at the beginning of this idea, but when I was first getting started, I was just happy for somebody to talk to me on my podcast.
Someone to say yes.
Somebody that said yes. So I was a little wide as far as the stories initially. And so over time, I tried to bring it back in, the whole HubSpot motto of you get your buyer persona. Same with a podcast, you get your listener persona. Like, who are you speaking to? And in your mind, you should know who you're talking to. And regardless of the kind of podcast that you have, speak to that one person or that one like really small demographic. And then you adjust your guests and the questions and the takeaways and all of that. It becomes easier. But initially I was kind of across the board. It was still that ripcord life change moment, but then it was a little bit broader, where I was interviewing people that were, at 22 years old, they graduated from college and ripcorded out. Somebody that's 38 years old and that's been a teacher for 15 years can't relate to that.
Right, someone that like already has a family and a mortgage, and it's like, oh, that's a very different transformation for them.
Different. Yeah. So my persona is that person that's 35 to 50 years old, and they're settled and they're set and they're stable, and they could do that same thing for the rest of their life, but something's pushing them to say, you know what, there's more. I want to sell everything and get on a sailboat or travel the world or open a brewery or open a bakery, whatever that is. So yeah, I'm speaking to the 30, 40, 50-year-old people.
And as someone who came into it with, like, as you admitted, no previous experience with podcasting, it's like, this is a good idea, let's do it. What were some of those early challenges that you ran into that you had to overcome?
The earliest ones were I never even had looked at an audio editing software. It was that basic. I have a lot of experience interviewing people, luckily, from hiring them. I was an executive recruiter. I've interviewed people for news publications. So I brought that experience in, but as far as like the nuts and bolts of, great, how do I get the idea from here onto Apple Podcasts? That was the biggest challenge. I didn't know how to edit. I didn't know how to do anything. So I jumped into the community here, and I raised my hand in one of the co-working spaces downtown. And I said, I'm Todd Nevins. I'm new to Austin. I'm going to start a podcast. I have no idea how to do it. So if you could help me, that'd be great. And if you couldn't, if you know of somebody else that could help me, that would also be great. And in Austin, true to form, the doors just flew open. And it was, you should talk to this person, you should talk to that person. And it was just kind of ebbing and flowing through the different communities and meetup groups and co-working spaces in Austin. And that's how I did it. And then, of course, you can learn anything by watching a YouTube video. So plenty of YouTube videos and other podcasts that are around how to start a podcast. And I just dove in and just really figured it out, and then partnered up with a couple of other local podcasters that gave me some pretty good tips along the way. And part of that was like hone into your audience, niche down. If you think your podcast is going to be for everybody, it's for nobody.
True. And I love what you said about how you just stood up and you just asked for help. And there's so many people that just don't take that step, that just don't put their message out there and allow others to help them.
It was awesome. It was just as you had hoped, and the doors in Austin, they just flew open. Everyone was willing to help or point me in the right direction if they couldn't directly help me. It was it's like nothing I had ever experienced. It blew me away, and that's why I was able to launch in under 3 months, from reserving my GoHuntLife.com URL to launching on iTunes. It was actually 64 days.
Awesome. Were there any specific breakthrough moments that you recognize? I mean, of course, at first you're just putting it out and you have faith that you're going to build that audience and it's going to work. But was there a point where you kind of saw this influx, and were there some strategies or techniques you used to help get you to that point?
Yeah. Once you have it up there, it's not just going to get listened to on its own. I mean, you got to market it. And so the marketing piece is key. Right now, podcasters are provided very limited metrics on how many downloads and listens and how far into an episode the average person listens. All of that stuff is not available to us yet. Apple is claiming that later on this fall they're going to provide content producers more information on their podcast content. But I used every social channel and every friend and Facebook and Pinterest and Instagram and Twitter and all of my LinkedIn profile. Every single podcast episode that went up, that goes up still to this day, hits all about 15 different channels, 3 different Twitter feeds, 3 different Facebook channels, and then certainly I'm reliant upon my guests' social channels as well. I mean, if my guest has a large social channel, that's icing on the cake, and then hopefully I'll ask them to share the episode with their audience, and that helps a lot. I mean, a lot of it also depends. I'm still a little bit. I've niched into like the storyline, but I've got people that opened a bakery, and I've got people that sold everything and got on a sailboat. Other people that opened up a brewery. So 3 very different, like after the ripcord, and so it is kind of dependent upon what their story is. The sailing stories are awesome because everybody dreams of selling it all, getting on a sailboat,
traveling the world,
hitting the islands. So that's helped. Those stories have helped tremendously, and I mean, a lot of the themes that have bubbled up as far as the people that I'm interviewing. A lot of the people now, I research who has TED Talks. TED Talks and TEDx Talks, they're skilled, they've got a story, and they've been vetted. If they're on that stage, they've been vetted. And so a lot of my guests now, I pull from somebody having a TED Talk, marketing influencers for sure, which means big social brands. And then also I've got a number of world record holders that were just normal, and they quit and they did something extravagant, and along the way, they have world records. And so those are the kind of the stories that have bubbled up, and the type of people in the backgrounds that have bubbled up. So
I love that. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of using TED or TEDx, but for your type of guests, I mean, it's often people.
It's great.
It's those stories of transformation, or the people that often get up on that stage.
Yeah, and they've conquered their fears, and they've risked. I mean, they've gone all in, and they've conquered their fears, and they're afraid of, am I messing up my life? Am I going to run out of money? A lot of the guests also have children, which I don't have children, so I can't. I was having a hard time. I was having a harder time relating to the people that have kids, and I thought, man, that's like, you're really going to be held back because you have children. Like, messing up my life and my wife's life together, at least it's our decision.
Okay.
It's our decision.
Yeah, we'll recover.
Yeah, we'll recover. But then the kids. But what I learned through interviewing parents is that they weren't held back with making a bold decision like this because of the kids. They did it because of the kids. Wow. They're like, if I'm not living an inspired life, how can I teach my children that look at me every day to live an inspired life on your own? So the kids have been the motivation every time I've interviewed people that have kids along the ride, whatever they're doing. It's because of the kids.
Wow.
I wouldn't have expected that initially.
No, I definitely wouldn't either. Do you have a process or certain techniques you use in order to draw those stories out of your guests?
Yeah, I research every guest extensively, and I send them all of the questions the day before. And when they receive the questions, they know what they're in for. I ask them 3 quick questions at the very beginning, and then I go back in time with them to take me back to their life previously, whether it was 5 years ago, 10 years ago. Put me back in your life. What'd you own? Did you own a house, cars, commute, job? Put me there. And then I chronologically bring them up to the ripcord, and then what happened after, and then today. And so that's how I research someone, and then I've gotten better at digging out real takeaways. Like, talk to the person that's on 35 right now, stuck in traffic, going to yet another business meeting that they don't want to go to. Talk to that guy or girl right now. Like, what can they do now to get to where you are in a year? Like, what are some of those really tangible takeaways? And so I've done a better job been at it a year and a half. I've always meticulously researched all of my guests, but I've done a better job of hopefully allowing my listeners to pull like tangible things that they can implement into hopefully their upcoming Ripcord.
Are there any particular stories? I mean, I know you've done, what, 69 episodes
69
now?
episodes as
69.
of Tuesday, yep.
Are there any, if you had to recommend a specific episode for somebody, or just one that's resonated the most with you, could you narrow it down to?
Absolutely. This is the one that I think about the most. Her name's Roz Savage. I think it's episode 40. It's early this year, and she was a management consultant in London. She was working for 15 years. And out of college, and she's like, I was working more and more, harder and harder to make more and more money, to buy a bigger house, to buy more things that I didn't want. And she came home from a business meeting one night late, and she sat down and she wrote 2 obituaries. The one that she was living towards, and the other one that she wanted to live. She went to bed, and she woke up the next morning scared to death, and tried to forget about the whole thing. And she went 6 weeks, and she couldn't get it out of her head.
Wow.
And so she quit her job. She didn't know what she was going to do. She went to South America and traveled for a year, wrote a book. She was always an ocean rower. She was always a rower in college. So she came back to London, and she bought a 23-foot rowboat and rowed across the Atlantic, the Pacific, and the Indian Ocean. First of 4 world records that she now holds. She's a Richard Branson level environmentalist. She's been out, this is about 13 years ago. She's got 4 world records, and I interviewed her when she was at Yale University, where she was teaching a course on courage. And that was the first person that talked about giving up in the middle of the ocean, and talked about, if I just went for a long swim, this would all be over. She was, the boat is like, it's a capsule, looks like a spaceship, and when storms come, you seal both capsules and you seal yourself into the front, and then you strap yourself down to the bed. And then it just capsizes, and then it right sizes. She was in the middle of the ocean, alone, huge storm, knocked out all ability to communicate with anyone. When it capsized at one point, the straps broke, so she was pinwheeling around inside, came out, all 4 of her oars were broken, everything went wrong. And she came to she came down to the thing of, she duct taped oars together enough to row, and she kept thinking 3 feet, 3 feet, 3 feet, because that's how she knew that she was able to move her boat 3 feet at a time every oar stroke, and she made it across the ocean.
That is incredible.
That I hung up with that one and thought, I'm on to something.
Now that you've done 70 episodes,
Yep.
What is that common theme or common themes that you've seen among all the different people in terms of what's inspired them, or what's given them the courage to take that leap?
A lot of times it's mentors. They follow somebody on Instagram, or they follow somebody on Facebook, or they read an article about someone that's doing something that they want to do. They want to quit it. One of my most recent ones was a couple out of northern Wisconsin. They were living normal lives, 9 to 5s, had a horse farm, and wanted to become travel bloggers. Complete 180. And so they started following travel bloggers. Another big theme that's come out of it is the term digital nomad. Now it's easier than ever to make money from wherever. And so that's also a theme where you don't have to be chained to an office in Chicago, Illinois anymore. You can work from anywhere. And even if you have a real job, you can reinvent and be a travel blogger. Even if you were an accountant, you can still do something different. And there are courses, there are people, there are free courses, there are enough things out there where you can teach yourself, even if you have to completely do something different. A lot of times you're pulling different skills from your background and you're combining those into something new. That's almost all of that's the podcast for me. Like I pulled from different areas, had to learn one big one, and then combined it, and that's been the theme as well. But the digital nomad, location independent entrepreneurs is a big one. I mean that's people are living all over the world and working from coffee shops and co-working spaces and hotels and house sitting, and it's easier than it's ever been to live anywhere and work.
Absolutely. So what have some of the impact been on your other business? Because of course this is a way to give back, but also from the beginning it's also a tactical way to increase lead generation. So how have you strategically used the podcast to help grow your own brand and grow your business?
Every episode that I have markets Click Placement, my AdWords marketing business. So that cross promotes my marketing business, and I cater to entrepreneurial, startup, nonprofit, small business kind of companies. So that's helped. That's the first thing. The second thing is it's now a profitable podcast. I also have a sponsor, so that helps with income and revenue for the podcast. And the third thing is that I'm now a podcast producer for a company out of San Antonio that because I was known as the guy that started the podcast from scratch in Austin and kind of worked my way through all the different channels. I was referred to one of the owners of a fund out of San Antonio, and now I'm the producer of their podcast as well. So it's percolated into all different channels of what I do. It's changed my life. It honestly has in a year and a half. And so I'm also now helping mentoring other people that want to start their own podcast.
That's awesome. Well, for someone that does want to start a podcast, where do you start with them in terms of mentorship? What are those first questions they need to ask themselves, those first steps that they need to take?
The biggest thing that people, there's an excitement. This is fun. I'm meeting other podcasters. This is cool. I'm going to be on iTunes. That sounds cool. Like all of that stuff. Yeah. And so I help them realize what they're in for. Because it's not easy. It's time consuming. I mean, as new podcasters, you're taking on from A to Z all the way across, from editing and marketing and promoting and then scheduling your next guests, and all of that stuff is on you. So each week I spend about 10 hours per episode. I've got about 10 or 11 hours invested in each episode. So I warn them, like, it's not just record yourself on your cell phone and then publish it to iTunes and then wait for everybody to listen. There are a lot of methodical steps that go into it, and so I let them know the truth. And but it's not. I encourage people. You know what? Go in and think about just recording 5 episodes in your mind. Record 5, and if you don't like it, no big deal. Leave it up on iTunes. It stays there forever as long as you pay for the hosting. But you'll determine if you like it or not by just thinking, I'm going to do 5. And then after that, you'll either love it, not like it, and you'll either stop or continue.
Yeah, it's been a big growth area for me doing the Content Edge. We're about 10 episodes in now. Okay. And yeah, at first, I was not very comfortable interviewing people. I'm kind of a naturally introverted person. I used to have a pretty severe stutter growing up, which I've kind of overcome. But yeah, just each episode has just gotten easier and easier. And I think probably the hardest thing for me was the ability to chat with someone while also be thinking about what to ask next. Like being in both places at once. And that was like so difficult, which I'm still not great at, but getting better,
I interview most of my guests through Skype because they're all over the world. And a lot of times I don't have video on. And so I'm able to be listening, but then have my notes right in front of me, which obviously makes it a heck of a lot easier than video. It's a lot more challenging. I'm now beginning to interview more people in person, where I've got the recorder, and then I'm Facebook Living the interview, which goes out immediately on Facebook, and then I edit down the actual audio, and then that goes out as an episode. And yes, you get better at interviewing, and then if it's your responsibility to edit that episode, you get a lot better quicker because it makes
because you listen to every single one of your and your no's, and that's certainly certainly helped me a lot as well. Well, how about for someone, you mentioned like after 5 episodes that's a point where you can be like, okay, is this working? Do I actually enjoy this? How about someone who's, 15, 20 episodes in, they're committed, they still have that faith, but they're not seeing the results yet? Like, how do you know when you should stick with an idea and it's just a matter of perseverance, and when you really need to think about the core concept and whether the idea itself is sound or you need to pivot to something else?
Incredible question. Great question. Someone that is, I went into this knowing that I wasn't going to stop. I went into it and there are certain things that I've done throughout my life that when the switch flips, I know I'm going to just keep at it. And I came into this knowing that was what I was going to do, and I was just going to kind of figure it out along the way. So what I tell new people, what clicked for me is that when I launched and I was about 15 or 20 episodes in, and all my close friends and family are listening, and they're commenting on Facebook, and they're telling me like, wow, cool, man, I listened to that episode, and that feels great. 15 to 20 to like 40 episodes, it's your like extended friends, like your friends that you haven't talked to, your Facebook friends, but you haven't really talked to them in forever. And when those people start commenting in, like, wow, I would have never had this conversation with that person for a long time if it wasn't for that podcast. So that's kind of like, gosh, there are people listening. After about 40, 45 episodes, it's when the complete strangers start coming to you. They send in emails and to contact us, or they comment on a tweet, or they comment on a Facebook, and you don't know them at all. When those people start commenting in, you're thinking, whoa, this person's in Portland, this person's in London, this person's in Dallas, and I don't know them. But somehow they found the show and it resonated with them enough to reach out to me and thank me. And it happened on my 1-year anniversary to the launch, June 30th. I woke up, it was a Saturday morning. I woke up and I thought, wow, I can't believe it. A year ago, I published my very first 3 episodes on day 1. And I opened up my laptop and there was an email from a couple out of Portland that said, we've been listening to your show. Super motivational for us. We're 30 days away from selling our house and we're going to travel the world and we're going to Scandinavia first. Thanks. On my 1-year anniversary. I almost to the point, like, is somebody punking me? Like, is this a joke? No, I got them on the show, actually. I called them, I interviewed them for a little snippet at the end of that next week's episode, and then I'm going to record a full episode with them in December after they've been out for 6 months. So that just a game changer. Like, I don't know how to, you can't recreate that. It's just effort, and then things like that happen.
Oh, I love it. Well, is there anything else that you'd like to add, that you'd like to share with the audience, inspiration or tips for someone that wants to take this podcast journey?
Yeah, listen to the Roz Savage episode. If you want to start with one, listen to hers. Another one that resonates well is Dave Cornthwaite. I interviewed him from his boat in a marina in London. You can hear the seagulls in the background, and he literally skateboarded out of his job. He was a terrible graphic designer, in his words, and he skateboarded out of the office and didn't know what he was going to do, and he figured out a way to go break the world record for the longest continuous skateboard across Australia, 3,600 miles, and now he's broken 5 or 6 other world records, and he just broke one a week ago. And so it's stories like that, and it doesn't matter if you're 30 or 60 or 70, it doesn't matter. You can always reinvent, and I've got 70 episodes to prove it.
Excellent. Well, Todd, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you very much, Alex.
And thank you for watching. This concludes another episode of The Content Engine. And remember, this is a weekly show, so I encourage you to please subscribe on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. And until next week, put your message in motion.